The foreclosure crisis that began in 2010 took a toll on neighborhoods across the country. We can still see some of the effects right here in Barnstable. On today's show, we'll take a look at a new program that is trying to turn around some of the harder hit neighborhoods in town. It's Friday, January 31st, 2014. I'm Sarah Mannel. Attorney General Martha Coakley sued 5 major banks in 2011 to hold them accountable for unlawful foreclosures and robo-signing of documents. A portion of the $25 billion settlement that resulted from that lawsuit is being used to fund the Abandoned Housing Initiative. The Abandoned Housing Initiative helps communities by identifying homes that have been hit hard by the foreclosure crisis and then working to make some improvements. This home in Brockton sat abandoned for some time until it was selected for the program. Once renovations are complete, you can see just how transforming rundown properties can improve an entire neighborhood. Town manager Tom Lynch says a town grant coordinator learned about the program and thought it would complement some of the work town council was already doing with the problem property ordinances.
It was a kind of a nice coming together of the Attorney General offices through Martha Coakley's staff wanting to expand onto the Cape with a program that had been very successful in southeastern Massachusetts and mainly Fall River, and saying to us, we have funding where we can help you through this difficult process.
And a difficult process it is. Town Attorney Ruth Weil says following the mortgage crisis, many loans were sold from bank to bank in an effort to ditch bad debt.
During the subprime mortgage crisis, there was something known as securitized mortgages, where mortgages were bundled and sold to investors. And it was very hard sometimes, and then resold, to figure out who owned your house. There was a local town councilor who went through a huge morass just to figure out who to pay her mortgage to. And that was pretty much nationwide, and I think some people were placed in a foreclosure situation just because they couldn't figure out who to pay their mortgage to. So that was obviously one of the debacles and unintended consequences from the whole subprime problem. You know, it's interesting, the whole, stepping back and how we got to this whole mortgage foreclosure crisis. People were using the homes as ATM machines, and banks were allowing you to use your home as ATM machines. It used to be the neighborhood bank. They knew you. They knew whether or not you could pay. This became a commodity, and the banks, the investors didn't care if you could pay it because they could sell it to somebody else. So it created terrible problems for trying to trace who owned a particular house.
The Abandoned Housing Initiative relies on a state statute that requires homeowners to keep properties up to current sanitary codes. According to state law, any property that is violating that code can be turned over to a receiver. Lynch says officials must follow a series of steps before that can happen.
Using the statute, the AG's office says, look, you're not keeping this property up to proper sanitary codes, and you're bringing down the property values and perhaps bringing crime and other issues into the neighborhood because of these distressed properties. So the first thing they do is they send a letter off to the property owner. Now, it's a lot easier to send that letter to a bank, and when the bank gets contacted by the Attorney General's office, the hope is that they'll turn around and say, all right, we've just been kind of sitting on it because it's in our portfolio, but we want to move it too. So they may begin to take steps to market it or move it back onto the tax, get it fixed up and move it on the tax rolls, or they may choose to go through the AG's process. And that second process is where it gets a little more involved, and we need the auspices of their office because Martha Coakley's staff can go in and into the courts, and the courts understand this program, and they can appoint a receiver who then goes about fixing up, the property and marketing it.
And the program doesn't just benefit neighborhoods and local communities, it can also benefit local contractors. Contractors who participate in the program are allotted funds for any necessary materials for the renovation, and they also will eventually be paid for their labor. Lynch says a lien is placed on each property to pay for the completed work.
They become first in line in terms of a lien. They, with the exception of property taxes that might be owed, they're next. So whether there's a mortgage or anything else, if they put in $75,000 or $100,000 worth of work, then when the property is sold, they get that immediately right off the top. They can also, as I understand from the presentation that was made here for local contractors, they can own it themselves and turn around and sell it, make their money back in that way.
Lynch says the Attorney General's office led a training session this week for local contractors who are interested in participating in the program.
We're hopeful that other contractors who may not have had time to come to this or the training but are interested in it would be willing to sit with our staff, get the same sort of training and deal with the Attorney General's office and figure out how to get into the program, because they, again, Martha Coakley's staff would like to work with local contractors wherever possible. Now, the person might be someone who's skilled in this and has done it in off Cape Town and come down here and do their work and move it on, but we'd like local contractors. So we spoke to all the town councils, asked them if they would, market it as much as they could with constituents they might know that wanted to do this, and we want to continue that sort of marketing. So as I say, I think it fits nicely with the problem property ordinances, because once you pass the law, then you need to implement it. And this is an example of the Attorney General implementing laws that have been passed out there and using existing laws. They didn't create new statutes. They'd used existing statutes to create this program. We now have a statute. We want to go after blighted or foreclosed and abandoned properties. And this gave us 2 years of funding to do that, to do the legal work and the basically operational work that we need to do to make this happen and coordinate with the Attorney General's office.
Lynch says there seems to be some unintended benefits from both the recently enacted problem property ordinances and the abandoned housing initiative.
Because one thing I've noticed is that in the discussions of the problem property ordinances and with discussion of things like this, certain properties that you were concerned about, that you knew needed fixing up, suddenly there was activity around it. You realtors and others that we had included in the process to talk to them about things that were happening started moving on some of the properties that were there, and that makes it more of a community effort. We all want to clean up some of these properties, and there's nothing like seeing new construction happening and new windows, new siding, new roofs, and then the house eventually sold and into the marketplace. So it benefits everyone.
And Weil echoed those sentiments.
If you have one abandoned, boarded up house in the neighborhood, I think it has a very, it undermines the entire fabric of that community, and people drive by it, and I think it has a psychological effect, and it obviously affects property values, and it's a whole broken window approach. I think if you have a house with broken windows and then you have more of them, it undermines the entire neighborhood. And I think the council, we have some wonderful neighborhoods, as we all know, in Barnstable. And this, I really have to emphasize, this came as a community initiative. The Greater Hyannis Civic Association identified a number of neighborhood problems, including abandoned and foreclosed properties, and they really focused on it. And they're focused too. They didn't want to punish people that had fallen into hard times, but they knew there were banks and second homeowners that were really adversely affecting the quality of life in neighborhoods. And there are all sorts of unintended consequences from that, crime, and just when there's lack of pride. There's all those studies about that it makes a huge difference in neighborhoods if everybody is pitching in together and trying to maintain the neighborhood.
Weil urges any contractors that are interested in participating in the program to contact her office. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mannel.